So we've reserved time at the end for questions, but please use the separate Q&A function in the webinar rather than the chat, because your question might get lost in the chat. At the end of the webinar, you'll be directed toward a short survey that we will use to measure the success of the forum and improve content for future webinars. So we appreciate it if you take a few minutes to complete the survey. And finally, we'll follow up after the webinar with a recording, the PowerPoint slides, and the survey link. Next slide, let's get started. So today's agenda. Well, first, let me introduce myself. Thanks for joining us. My name's Olivia Arnone. I'm the co-director of Greater Rochester Clean Cities. The mission of GRCC is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the use of alternative fuels. We're really excited to be partnering with AMPED and our presenters on this webinar and to be able to support our regions, the schools in our region in their journey toward electrification. So the agenda for today is to do some introductions and talk about our webinar goals. We'll review what AMPED is. We'll look at our presentations, electric school bus funding overview, and we'll look at Ithaca and Gates Chi Central School's journey towards electrification, and then we'll have a panel Q&A at the end. Next slide. Our presenters today are Jeremy Johnston, who is the Director of Sales for both New York Bus Sales and School Lines in Connecticut. And he's here to provide his expert guidance on all aspects of funding and the options currently available in New York State. Following Jeremy will be Elizabeth Fox, who is a transportation supervisor for Ithaca Schools and is here to share her experiences advancing the electrification of Ithaca's school buses. And Matt Helmbold is the transportation supervisor at Gates Chi Central Schools, and he is also here to share the experiences of his district. Next slide. The goals for our webinar today are to better understand the available sources for electric school bus funding and the next steps for learning more, to learn from districts at different points in their electrification process and get your questions answered, and to understand the early steps toward an electric school bus transition. Next slide, please. The AMP campaign was established in 2021 as a community resource with the purpose of mitigating the impacts of climate change by reducing carbon pollution through the promotion of beneficial electrification in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. Next slide. We couldn't provide this essential information to our community without the support of the Climate Solutions Accelerator and Greater Rochester Clean Cities. Next slide. And a huge thanks to our dedicated steering committee and our creative partners. And now I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Jeremy.
Well, good afternoon now. Thanks for having us. Here on behalf of kind of the OEM partners and dealers across the state, but to help talk about funding specifically. Next slide, if you would, please, Julia. So the big thing here is it's not just you alone in this situation. You have your dealers, your OEM partners, your powertrain partners, but also some infrastructure partners, which are kind of new to this piece, just to make sure that you can collaborate and bring everybody together to make sure you're on the same page through the transition. Next slide, please. So again, this isn't really new technology. It's just technology that makes sense now. So Bluebird actually built its first electric school bus back in 1994. So again, it's not new, but also grant writing and finding funding is not new to the team as well. Little bit on the background. Next slide, please. That works. I'm sure you're all familiar with the mandate. So in July of 2027, all new school buses purchased in New York State must be electric. And by 2035, 100% of your school bus fleet needs to be electric. Next one, please. So how do we make that possible? So there's a couple of different funding programs to look at. The first is the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program through NYSERDA. There's a couple of requirements and caveats to this. You have to have a pre-2010 diesel unit to scrap. You have to service a disadvantaged community or have your transportation department domiciled within a half a mile of a disadvantaged community. Those represent the blue maps or blue dots on the map. You actually have to report on the units for 3 years. You're only allowed 5 units under the program. It funds $200,000 off of the invoice price of an all-electric bus. Kind of the downside is none of those funds go towards infrastructure, but it does help you qualify for the Joint Utilities of New York Infrastructure Program. At the bottom of the slide here, you'll see what the funding levels are based on the vehicle class. So that's one option for you. Next slide, please. The second round, the one that everybody is talking about now, is the EPA Clean School Bus Funding Program. This is $5 billion spread over 5 years. The focus is on electric, but propane and CNG do qualify. Again, when you look at the funding levels from the truck voucher program at $200,000 for a bus, if you are a priority district as defined by the EPA, you'd qualify for $375,000 for a class 7, which would be above 26,000 GVWR. But this one also actually handles some charging infrastructure costs as well, up to $20,000 per bus per charger. So that's the advantage to this program. Next slide, please. So EPA round 1 has closed. That was last year. Districts now should be finalizing that application. Some of the same criteria from round 1 and round 2 are the same. There's some different tweaks that have been made, but same high needs, low income, rural areas, and tribal communities are prioritized. If you're not a priority district, you're still open to apply. That was a very simple 20-minute application done through sam.gov. And now if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about round 2 that we're currently in. So there's $4 billion left after round 1. Round 2 is going to cover $400 million, but it is a more complex narrative that needs to be completed. As you see the timeline below, August 22nd of this year is when the applications are due. It requires a little bit more legwork than the first round. 15-page narrative, not including all the supporting documentations. Again, charging infrastructure is also covered. Next slide, please, and we'll kind of get into what else is covered. This is $37 million for Region 2, which includes New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. We have that $37 million open to our region for round 2 specifically. Next slide, please. So priority levels have changed, funding levels have changed. Now they rolled that $20,000 per charger into the application. So it was $375,000 plus 20 for the chargers. Now they've just rolled it into $395,000. Again, propane and CNG are also included, but again, the focus is electric. If you're not priority, you're still open to apply. Next one, please. So is scrappage required? Yes, it is. If you have a pre-2010 diesel unit, you must get rid of that first. If you don't have a pre-2010, you can sell, scrap, or donate any 2011 or newer internal combustion vehicle. Does not have to be diesel either. Just has to have a GVWR of 10,000 pounds or more. So that is some good news for some of those districts that don't qualify for that truck voucher program. Next slide, please. Again, charging infrastructure is covered, both level 2 chargers and DC fast chargers. You see that dotted line coming down the center. So anything that's part of your control panel in the building, all the way out to where the buses are parked, is covered under this program. But again, it's advantageous to take advantage of this because it covers both of those pieces. Next slide, please. Also, good news is costs for training and consulting are covered under this. That could be construction costs, consulting, it could be architecture firms, basically anything that you can roll into that budget that needs to be presented that will help with your transition to electric can be covered under the program. Just make sure that you have that plan in place as you go to submit the application to make sure all of those costs are covered under the program. Next one, please. So it's not just the funding from the EPA. We're also trying to track some of the local funding sources. So in the Governor's Bond Act that was approved last November, the governor has $500 million earmarked for electric school buses in New York State. But as you see in that bottom section, the focus is still on disadvantaged communities. So once we get more word on that, we'll also be sharing information on how to apply, where you can get your hands on those funds. Next slide, please. That is it for my piece, but again, we'll stick around if you have any questions along the way. We're a resource. You're not alone. Reach out to all of us that are out there to help. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Just a reminder to please put any questions in the Q&A so we can answer that at the end. And next up is Elizabeth from Ithaca City School.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Fox. I'm from the Ithaca City Schools, and I'm here today to talk to you about our path to electrification. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk to you about Ithaca's journey. I feel very fortunate to be working at Ithaca at this time and surrounding myself by many people that I feel like are experts in their field and sort of surrounding myself by a team for this project. So we'll talk about our team, we'll talk about our path for starting electrification, and then we'll talk about our plan for the implementation of those few buses. Next slide. All right, so these are members of the team that we have, and I'll go into each of these a little bit more detail on the next few slides. Slide. All right, so these are our internal partners that we have on our team. And like I said, this has been the most helpful part for me, is not feeling alone. And yes, I'm an expert in my current operation, our current routing, staffing, bus safety, but I have these experts around me as a team that hold monthly and now weekly meetings now that we're into the implementation, and that's been very helpful for me to be successful and our district to be successful. So you'll see the business official is the expert in the avenues of funding. They know how to utilize the reserve funds, the general funds, the capital projects, and it's definitely necessary to have them at all of your meetings to develop budgeting around this EV project. Facility director, they in your district have the most normally historical knowledge about your bus garage site and services. They will have relationships with municipalities and partners like your local BOCES. They also have existing relationships with staff and contractors that already work for the district. IT director, they're important to make sure that you can connect your chargers and to the dashboard, and that they can help with any kind of technology training that is necessary. And like I said, transportation supervisor / fleet manager or head mechanic, these are your local experts in the bus garage things, but this is not a project we want to do alone. We want to make sure we have all these experts around us to create the team to make sure you're successful. Next slide. And here you will see our partners outside of our district that Ithaca has chosen. New York Bus Sales is our manufacturer. They provided very professional support. We've had a sales rep on every call that we've had, even if it wasn't specifically to New York Bus Sales. Anytime a manufacturer or bus question comes up, they're able to answer it and be part of the conversation. They've provided a connection with the energy consultant, which is Girardin Energy, now named Polera Energy. So you might see that in the future. They've helped connect for the fleet study through Girardin Energy and make sure all dashboard and communication was done for the chargers. They've been very helpful in community and board education presentations as well, and just providing resources. Tetra Tech is a company, an architectural company that has helped us with drawings for our infrastructure. They've also helped partner with the construction company that we have. They have provided also very professional project management. They help us with our agenda, keeping the minutes, keeping us on schedule. And so that has been very helpful in that management as well. Melcorp, they happen to be the electrician that is experienced with other projects on college campuses. And when we've had a couple problems arise, they were able to quickly resolve them with the electrical engineer at Tetra Tech to make sure that that path went smoothly. And then campus construction, they help partner with our finance committee, our board of education, our facility director, and all of our contractors to ensure that the professional work is done on time at Ithaca. So these people that we've picked on both these last slides have been super helpful to me. Next slide. So here is our path that we have chosen, and you'll see in the next slide a little bit bigger picture of the staging. So Tetra Tech helped us develop this, so we're able to work along this timeline. We've received 2 electric buses on site now that are currently en route and functional. We have installed 4 level 2 chargers on site, 2 level 2 chargers on schools within our district, just to provide more charging if necessary. We are slated to receive 3 additional school buses later this year. And so that will cap out our 5 buses that we have used the New York State Truck Voucher Incentive Program towards. So not only have we used our general funds within our budget for purchase of our first 4 chargers, we've also utilized the capital reserve for our bus purchases and our stage 1B that you'll see on the next slide for additional chargers. And then you'll see here, we are engaging in a capital project slated for 2026 of approximately $11 million. And that is to provide infrastructure for the future of our 100% electrification. We are currently applying for the Clean EPA round 2, and with support of New York Bus Sales and a grant writing company, that process has been going smoothly as well. Next slide. And again, here's just a quick staging of what our path looks like here at Ithaca. Next slide. So things to take into consideration as we've been implementing, things that we've been brainstorming around are what routes are optimal to be electrified. With the fleet study from Girardin, that's been super helpful. What population and community do we want to serve first? So you'll always find a number that can be electrified, and how do we pick which ones to send our first buses on? We want to make sure that we're picking drivers that are advocates for electric buses, people that are enthusiastic about training and learning and sharing with others. We have been creating internal training processes for drivers that they need to complete before they're able to drive electric vehicles. And we do this in order to protect the students and the assets, because obviously they're very costly buses. And then just provide training for the following staff. And then our team has been brainstorming how our EVs going to change our operation. There's lots of things to consider, like union issues, bidding processes, chargers. If they're not on location, how are we going to utilize them? Next slide. And just a couple questions that I came up with is, why is purchasing electric buses important to ICSD? Our superintendent had to say, there are many strategies, policies, and behavior shifts needed for the type of sustainability our school community deserves. Scaling the use of electric buses is just one of those efforts here. And what does it mean? What does an equitable transition to electric school buses mean? That just means we're picking the communities that are impacted the most by diesel exhaust pollution, and we're making sure we serve those communities first. And where do I start the process in electrification for those that have not started? Just build your team of experts. I gave you examples below of the people you might want to include. start one step at a time and make sure you hold yourself to meetings on a regular basis just to keep those baby steps going. Next slide. And Steve Jobs said, great things in business are never done by one person. They are done by a team of people. You'll see my contact below, and on the next page, next slide, you will see our like third party outside of our district partners as well. That is their contact information. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And our third and final speaker is Matt Helmbold from Gates Chili Central School District.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide. This is just, I believe they're going to share it out, but if not, you can take a picture of this and they'll have our slides on there as well. Give you a second for that. Okay, next slide. So I want to just put a little timeline out there. Gates Chili started back in the summer of 2020, looking to bring on some electric buses to our fleet. In the spring of 21, our district voted to bring on 2 electric school buses, and the summer of 21, we applied through the truck voucher program for the money. In the winter of 21-22, we were awarded $400,000. Well, Matthews Buses was awarded $400,000 from NYSERDA. This particular truck grant goes through the dealer, not through the district. Spring of 2022, the governor announced the plan by 2035 to be 100% all electric buses. The summer of 2022, we did receive our 2 electric school buses, and the fall of 2022, they hit the ground running. We had them out on our runs. They ran all year. Next slide. So just a little glance here. They are 66 passenger buses. We were say around 100 plus miles per charge. We're finding it's about a mile. You know, you get about a mile per percent, which is kind of, even in the winter, goes down a little bit, but that's a pretty quick number for our drivers to manage. The current chargers take about 8 hours to fully charge. There's some maintenance cost savings ahead of that, of course, without having to buy the diesel fuel. And training was provided by our dealer, not only to our mechanics, to our driver trainers, as well as our first responders. Next slide. So currently what's up and running is 2 24 kilowatt chargers. Those are level 3 chargers. They run off an existing pole barn that we have here that had 208 service. We are able to add 2 more to that pole barn as needed. And we are waiting for our infrastructure for our 60 kilowatt chargers to be finished. We do have the charger. I have 2 chargers in our garage currently. I'm just waiting for a panel box to come in so our electrician can install them. Those will be 408 volt. Next slide. So environmental benefits was a big part to our district. You can see the diesel versus the EV. There is still some greenhouse gases with the EV. It does, you know, this takes into account if there is a power plant that requires, you know, coal. This takes into account the tires, the brakes, everything else. So there are greenhouse gases still with an EV bus, but much lower than a diesel. And then same on the other slide, that is, you know, wear and tear and everything that creates gases as well. Next slide. So this was what we presented to the board with the truck voucher program of the 200,000 off the bus. The $138,000 diesel bus is what we bought. So that's our options and everything. So you might have a lower price on your diesel bus. That's what our diesels cost. So with the same options, but going electric, our bus was $382,000. You know, we did $4 a gallon. This was a while back. And then, you know, the electric was we're still waiting to finalize what our electric bill will look like. But if we're around what we're saying, there's a cost savings over the bus. Next slide. Some lessons that we've learned: you got to pack your patience. Buses won't even arrive on time is one example. But you're dealing with different agencies. You're dealing with state agencies, your dealer, your electrical. Everyone's involved. The industry is still evolving. Everything's changing. From the chargers that we picked out 2 years ago aren't even the chargers you would get nowadays. We had to change our architect drawings. We had to change everything just because the 60 kilowatt chargers have changed. They're more easier to install now. There's more options. Just in the 2 years, it's crazy how much that has changed. We said, don't be a hero, let someone else do that. Especially for gates, we were the first ones in this area doing this. Not a lot of people out there to help you. So everyone was just kind of taking it slow and hoping we had the right answers coming in. Agencies are learning too. You know, don't expect you're going to get all the answers. We're learning. We're learning with RG&E, our local electric company. Everyone's learning on this one, so just expect different information to come in at some times. Stay the course. You'll get there eventually. We're still almost there. We're really excited to have our other 3 up and running soon. We're waiting for the fast chargers to get installed. Once they're installed, it'll definitely help us with our routes. I know there's a lot of questions out there with our routes. We are able to manage them currently with what we have, but we'll be able to do much better with the fast chargers. Next slide. That was it.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you guys for all keeping your presentations so concise that we have a pretty good amount of time to answer questions here. So we'll move into the Q&A, and we do have a few questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and start reading them off. First question is, what forecasts can be developed on the cost reduction curve for the purchase of an electric school bus? What is the expected life of an electric school bus versus a diesel or gas bus? Is that a question for Jeremy?
Yeah, I could field that question. So cost reduction curve, honestly, it's all about maximizing your funding, where you can stack funding, if you can use federal funds versus state funds, if you can find some grants out there for charging infrastructure, being able to utilize those different avenues to help offset the cost will help. Long term, as battery technology evolves, costs will probably come down, just supply and demand. In terms of the expected life of an electric school bus, the body doesn't change. Battery warranty is 8 years, kind of standardized across all school bus manufacturers. But that doesn't mean that the useful life is expired at the 8-year mark. Batteries are expected to last 12, 15 years. You're just going to see degradation over time. And what that means is you just have to bring the bus closer and closer to the transportation department as it ages.
Thank you. This one, next one may also be for Jeremy. Is the EPA current grant program the same as the rebate program? Wait,
excellent question.
Grant program the same as the rebate program coming out next month? Okay,
so the rebate program is supposed to be announced in the fall of 2023. It is not the same program, this same funding source, different program. This one requires a district to apply for at least 15 electric buses. If you partner with your dealer, the dealer must apply for a minimum of 25 buses. This is a more extensive program where the rebate program is that 20-minute application through sam.gov.
Thank you. And this one is for Elizabeth. In Ithaca, as you move down the path to full electrification of the fleet, are you anticipating the need to involve your local electric company to increase grid capacity to your bus garage? If so, are they on board with making it happen?
So I can say that we've engaged with Tetra Tech, there's an electrical engineer on board. Gerard and Energy did an initial fleet study of full electrification, which is a snapshot of what our routing looks like currently. So we sent them some information and questions from the electrical engineer. They were able to do a revised fleet study of what we anticipate it looking like down the road as things change. And they took that and sent it to Anna had that from Tetra Tech. They reached out to NISAG and they did not give us any negative feedback that they couldn't provide that for us at the bus garage. So that fleet study was very helpful in that area.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next question. Matthew mentioned they got 100+ miles per charge. What is the average mileage the buses run per day?
Well, our current routes works fine on that. I mean, that would be up to whatever your transportation department routes are. Our buses average probably 35 to 40 miles in the morning, 35 to 40 miles in the afternoon. Currently, right now, it works fine for the routes that we're on.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What kind of support could municipalities provide to school districts to help facilitate the conversion to electric buses? Does anybody feel they might be able to?
Yeah, we can take that. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think it's community involvement. It's making sure that everybody is involved in the process, making sure there's no surprises for those that are living in the district. Again, it's a community process, making sure they understand the mandate that everybody has to meet these requirements by 2027. I think that would be the biggest piece of support that they could provide.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next question. Does Ithaca own or contract transportation? Is electric school bus to grid or electric school bus to building part of the Ithaca electric school bus transition plan for 2035?
So we are district owned. We own our own transportation. And we do not have a plan for vehicle to grid. Although we do have in our capital project included solar panel canopies over the buses. So that can help us produce energy as well and energy back to building. I think that I don't know the plans exactly, but I do know that we have that plan to incorporate solar canopies.
Thank you. Here's another question. We have many school districts on Long Island. Some have a complete fleet, some supplement with a private bus company or companies, and others use only a private bus company or companies. Are these programs open to private bus companies? Jeremy, I think is that a funding question?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the program that you're going to apply for. Private bus companies, as Matt mentioned, can use the truck voucher incentive program. You just need to work with your dealer to help you through that application process. The EPA program is also open to private organizations. Again, it's finding areas where you can stack funding to make sure that you can maximize that. Also trying to use some of the funding for charges itself and not just the bus. So again, work with your dealers as they're the best resource as to where you can find it, but also even a grant writing team to help support that.
Thank you. This question is for Matt and Elizabeth. How has weather, extreme cold, impacted the EV battery?
We have not noticed a major difference. We do, you're running your heaters, but the mileage didn't drop too bad. We have on, I'm not sure on the other manufacturers, the battery management software. The buses go out at, proper temperature for the batteries. The chargers are constantly maintaining the temperature of the batteries on our buses. So even though it's cold out, they are going out. They're not going out frozen. So we haven't noticed too large of a drop off.
Same with you, Elizabeth. Have you noticed any? And you have a lot of hills in Ithaca as well, right?
So we have just received our first two on route, so we have not experienced, the coldest part of the winter yet. So I'm excited to see what that's going to look like. The regenerative braking part is very cool to see that as it's driving and building energy in the hills in our area. But that fleet study that I told you was done, that was very helpful. That does anticipate the really cold weather months and gave us a good idea of what routes that was going to work on during those months. So that was helpful.
Thank you. Another question, how are you handling sports and field trips? Are you utilizing any electric vehicles for that? Or Matt, I guess, Matt, have you had any kind of come into any issues utilizing the vehicles beyond the bus route?
Currently, all year, we have not put them on a sports or a field trip. We do have one bus that we did put with a McKinney-Vento student on the opposite side of town. So, I mean, it was going out and doing about 93 miles a day. We just didn't do field trips yet, just due to the fact that our drivers are so used to sitting on their buses. And a lot of schools in our area have not let drivers in yet. So that's kind of why we haven't gone that road yet.
And I would say we haven't either, but I know part of like our team conversations is that, as you start to get towards that 100% electrification, we're really going to see everybody's across the industry, their operation change and how we do field trips change. And so in part of our capital projects, we've already planned to put some chargers near the stadium for visiting buses. And, there may be things in the future like, coasters through BOCES where you can share charging with school districts. So I'm sure that things are going to change as we start to electrify more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. This question is for Jeremy. The state initiative is not all buses need to be electric by 2035, but rather zero emissions. Electric is currently the only source that meets the requirement. As a bus manufacturer, are you looking at other means of zero emissions, or what is the future of other energy sources?
That's a great question. So, I mean, it's tough to say at this point. So every market seems to have its fuel type that is most beneficial. We've dealt with propane school buses in the past, the transition to gasoline full-size buses. I think it's an ever-changing market. I think as mandates change and evolve, there might be updates to those mandates. But currently, we've got to go with what is the only source available. If Bluebird is working on other sources for zero emissions vehicles, we're not aware of it. But that's not to say that there isn't something else in the works. But again, we just use the resources that we have to meet the current mandates until that changes.
Great. Thank you. This next question is about the sort of technical maintenance side of buses. Matt or Elizabeth or Jeremy, maybe even you can answer. Do district bus mechanics maintain and repair the buses? And have any repairs or maintenance beyond wiper blades and tires been necessary so far in your experience?
Well, we ran them all year, preventive maintenance, just like every other bus. The bus from the body up is exactly like your diesel bus. It's 12 volts, everything on it's exactly the same. So I would say if a window switch breaks on your diesel, it's probably broke on our electric bus. Jeremy mentioned an 8-year warranty on the batteries. That's the same as our manufacturer. So anything major when it's come to that, they do get involved. My slide said pack your patience. Your mechanics are not going to know everything when it comes to an electric bus, and either are your dealers. So it might have to sit a day or two until you guys figure it out. But we kind of planned on that for the first year. And as we've gone through and really learned them already, the downtime has changed. So.
The only thing I'll add to that, if I could, is as Matt mentioned, rely on your dealers. They already have training for your mechanics as well. As Matt mentioned, a 12-volt system doesn't change, but the training for the mechanic shows them what to touch, what not to touch, what the maintenance intervals are for any of those high voltage items, and who to call if there's an issue that needs to be resolved. But also if there's an issue with the charger, who do you call? That's where you need to find a team that understands the big picture, so you can make one phone call to resolve all of those issues, whether it's bus or charger related.
Should have had this question come before that one, because this is also on the sort of training, the lines of training, but how do you train drivers and mechanics for this transition? And what are some of the training resources that you have found helpful?
So I can answer at least for mine, and then maybe Matt can tell you how he did. But so our mechanics, they just attended the Head Mechanics Association training, and New York Bus Sales put on an EV training for mechanics the day ahead of time. So they have been involved in the whole process, the fleet manager and the mechanics. They've already attended the training prior to the buses going on route. They feel very comfortable knowing that they have the resources to reach out if needed. As far as driver training, New York Bus Sales came out and trained our office staff and a few of our trainers. We created our own internal checklist of what we wanted that to look like when we train our drivers, and then internally certify them. So that was very helpful, but actually training our trainers so that way we're able to reproduce that within our department was very key for that.
And yeah, we were pretty much the same. Our dealer trained our mechanics for what they needed to work on, touch, not touch, like Jeremy mentioned. The dealer trained our trainers, so our trainers trained our drivers. We did train every single driver last summer, and every driver did drive the bus. So we had everyone in our whole fleet go through the electric bus training as well as drive the vehicles. And then our big one for us was our first responders. Our dealer came in and trained over 90 fire men and women. So they were prepared if there's something in our area.
Thank you. There's a question that came in by email. I think that Jeremy may have touched upon this when you talked about the truck voucher incentive program, but what is the status of the change in the truck voucher program that will allow schools to be eligible for funding through NYSERDA and the utilities to cover the cost of infrastructure past the meter to the charging stations?
Excellent question. So once you get approved for the truck voucher program, there's also a group called the Joint Utilities of New York. That's all the major utility providers, National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, NYPA, Lower Hudson. There's a big group basically that has been on every bill charging a certain percentage on your bill. It opens up funding for infrastructure to be brought to your facility. That would be anything infrastructure side of that control panel, kind of in conjunction with the truck voucher program, but same program helps qualify you for that funding process.
Thank you. The next question, as we transition to electric school buses, and we understand that they are also distributed energy resources that can be used as part of the building electrification solution, which includes adding solar panels to school buildings. Does this make the decision to in-source transportation capabilities for energy management control and the associated benefits from a microgrid comprised of solar panel and mobile batteries a more likely strategic direction for school districts, or better to partner with a firm that does both transportation and energy management? Elizabeth, you had given us a bit of an answer to that by email. Do you want to touch upon that for the group?
Yeah, I think I just think it's important to have, I know I talked about in my presentation, having teams, but also just having partners that can develop the plan. So in Ithaca, it's district-owned transportation. So yes, we have that, but we're including partners, like I said before, Tetra Tech, who is finding ways to include other sources of energy. So those solar canopies, like I talked about before, that will be covering our school buses in the parking lot and providing energy back to the district. So making sure you have, if you're a transportation like expert, you have other people you can partner with that know the energy management side and how they can incorporate that in the long-term electrification plan.
We did ask our steering committee that question as well. And the answer we got was, I think what is being asked is whether the school district should subcontract a bus operator or own buses and operate in-house. It's important to choose partners that can provide the best transportation solution, one that has an understanding of energy management and GHG reduction tools available, as well as one that can consider available incentives and programs. Many types of bus companies can work within this framework, whether through a contracted bus owner operator or a bus company where the district would own and operate. These bus operators or manufacturers may already have relationships with other energy management or GHG reduction tools. There are also many resources in New York through both the electric utility and NYSERDA that can help support thinking through how best to come up with a plan. We have another question coming through the Q&A. As your fleet grows, are you anticipating a need for having one charger for every bus? If not, what ratio are you predicting?
I can speak for Gates. We will have, I don't want to say one charger, but we'll have one charger lead. The new chargers, we have charged 2 buses at a time. But yes, we are finding the need to have one port for every bus to keep up with the mileage demand.
I believe that is.
Go ahead, Liz, sorry.
I was just going to say, I believe that that's the plan for Ithaca as well, even for our spare buses, that they have the ability to have a charger there when needed.
And the other part of that, as Matt kind of touched on it, is preconditioning those buses in the winter months. If you have those spares sitting there, you're going to want them hooked to a charger to make sure that the bus is warm and accepting a charge, to make sure that if it's needed, it can go out and run. So operationally, you might change some things. But I would say long-term, a 1-to-1 ratio would be perfect, but also a combination of enough DC fast chargers in the fleet to accommodate those midday runs or sports trips, just to make sure that every bus is properly charged to meet the run that it's on.
And then there are a couple of questions came in through the chat. Is there any formal training for your mechanics on Bluebird, Thomas, and IC bus? Is there a cost or is it free with the purchase of your bus?
So for us, there is no cost associated to the training. We want to make sure that we're delivering you a bus, having your staff trained. So we're just not leaving you to figure out all of those quirks. It's also training the drivers how to efficiently drive to make sure you're going to see the maximum range in both hilly areas, cold weather climates, but also training your technicians. As we mentioned, make sure they know who to call or what to do in case there's an issue.
We had no charge from our dealer as well.
Thank you. Another question has come through the chat. NISAG and RG&E has run fleet advisory services where many school districts have engaged with the program. Oh, that's not a question. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, get in touch with the utility programs on fleet advisory that might be available. Another Q&A question. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. This one's about like quelling fears. So if parents have fears of their children riding, there's a lot of information out there about fires on buses. How do you provide any information to the community about the safety of the buses and parents with their kids riding on the buses? How do you reach out to families in that way? Or have you had an experience with that?
I can speak for Gage Chali. That has not come up yet. Run all year. They've been on the media around here, and that has not been something that's been brought to our attention.
So from our standpoint, we delivered a electric bus out in the Buffalo area. One thing the transportation supervisor out there did was make sure that all of the fire districts that bus would service or travel through went through a first responder training initially. So they hosted a first responder training for all first responders, but also tow truck drivers and anybody who might service it. There were probably 115 attendees, just making sure that everybody was up to speed on how to disable the vehicle, what to do in the situation of an accident, and everything was included just to make sure that community was up to speed on the process itself.
And I know that Ithaca plans on doing that exact same thing. And I can say too that I know that it really is going to affect the safety of the kids on the daily ride, just how quiet the bus is and the behaviors on the bus. The driver's going to be less distracted because he can actually hear what's going on. I think those are going to be some really good things about the electric bus as far as safety goes.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think that's about all the questions that we have time for today as we wrap up our webinar. The AMPED has many resources that you can consult when you're on this while you're on this journey toward electrification. The AMPED website has success stories, information about incentives and financing, and links to resources to take action. There's a blog and emails and social media with ongoing content sharing resources, news and updates, and opportunities to support the work. And we have webinars on a quarterly basis, dealing with a variety of electrification topics. So the next steps you can take are follow AMPED on LinkedIn or Facebook to stay in the know about electric school bus updates. You can explore decision-making resources for school districts from the Alliance for Electric School Buses. You can visit the EPA website to learn more about this round applications, which are due August 22nd. You can also email info@grcc.us for a free one-on-one coaching session about your fleet needs. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and thank you so much for the panelists for sharing their information and expertise with us. The next webinar will take place on Thursday, November 16th at noon. Just also a reminder that you'll be directed toward a short survey to help us improve our webinars and measure our impact. And you'll also receive that email with today's recording slides, and the survey link will be there as well. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.